looking at how technology can plug the gender gap based on what we are witnessing in our respective spheres, how we can encourage more capital and action to be crowded in towards inclusion and empowerment. We have a diverse and esteemed panel of investors and entrepreneurs with us, and a very warm welcome to you. Archana, Dheeraj, Liz, and Tushar, thank you for joining us.
Just going back to the 2x challenge, I mean, we're absolutely delighted today that Chiratae's fourth fund has qualified under the 2x challenge and is our first 2x qualified VC fund in South Asia. And I think, you know, this platform today is one sign of that commitment to gender lens investing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz, and we are delighted to be qualified as well, and we look forward to working with CDC Group in advancing gender outcomes in our portfolio. And your views on these two questions. The first one is, what would you consider is the most significant wicked problem related to gender disparities in India, which technology has a huge potential to fix? And the second question to be addressed is, what would you name as a success story where investing in women as founders or customers has generated outsized returns and impact at scale? We can go alphabetically, and Archana, we'll start with you.
I think in terms of the kind of wicked problem, as you call it, there's a ton of unequivocal data on how technology can improve women's access to economic empowerment, and also not just for women themselves, but also for the entire households. And so I don't think the problem is technology itself. It's kind of the unequal access to technology for women versus men. And so what we see is that women don't have the same access to information and tech that men have. And that revolves sometimes around the way the technology is designed or the business model and distribution channels through which technology is actually delivered. So I think in areas, especially in financial inclusion, we see a lot of increased impact that tech can have through just improving that access for women specifically. Some success stories from our portfolio, there are a few that rise to mind. I think one, since we're on financial services, I'll call out is an investment we made in Bangladesh in bKash, which is kind of the ubiquitous mobile money platform in Bangladesh. We came in early as a Series A investor, and today the company is tracking about 40 million regular users on the platform, over 1/3 of which are women. The interesting aspect for us is that 90% of the company's users are actually previously unbanked, who are now being brought into the digital economy, and we see that as having a really high impact.
To the first questions on the wicked problem and where technology can actually play a role. I mean, because we are in a reproductive health testing business, what we know is India is a country of at least 30 million couples who have a very sort of a lifelong infertility issues, and where they don't know actually among the wife and the husband who's actually responsible. And every time the conversation comes up, it's always about the woman, it's always about the wife. And what we definitely know, and from a lot of research and a lot of data we have, is actually 50% of infertility in India is actually because of male. But because nobody got tested, and nobody actually found out, it's not the problem on just on one end. So having these tests and having that insight from understanding where to actually work on, and clearly we found counseling couples and really talking about it very openly, the couples accept and work towards it. So clearly I think in the infertility space, where I think we're the second largest in India in terms of that problem and that burden, I think technology definitely play a large role. On the second thing, in the investing in the women-centric business or women-led business, I think clearly Nykaa is my sort of very closely seen how that platform has built up very sizable business on the women-centric product led by women. And have made a massive impact in both on the next gen millennial purchasing behavior, finding that product, but also I think overall in the e-commerce marketplace, a unicorn going for an IPO. What a fantastic success story coming from India in a very, very short span of time.
I mean, I think when we look at India, one thing which strikes you is the female participation in the workforce and how that's been dropping in recent years. And obviously there are multiple reasons for that. And I would hope there are multiple ways we can address this. From an investment point of view, CDC always looks to invest in companies that are growing and companies that are providing jobs for men and for women. And I think one really interesting example is our investment in iMerit, which is a kind of cutting edge data labeling firm, sort of bridging what you might regard as sort of very underserved communities in India and Bhutan uh, and with the most kind of cutting edge AI kind of sort of high end use of technology. And I think that just goes to show that you can't make any assumptions about how technology can provide solutions. And if you have kind of founders that are very thoughtful and investors that are supportive, you can really kind of bridge some of these divides. But that's not to say that it's an easy thing to do, and we're always looking for those kind of opportunities. And like Archana, we've also seen quite a lot of success with financial services reaching women, both as workers and actually in terms of sort of employment. Our financial services sector does employ quite a lot of women. And as we digitize, I think there are opportunities there. But I think as we've seen with COVID, there's quite a lot that's playing out now, and quite well we're going to be at the other end in terms of where people work, where technology can be a solution, or where there may be challenges is on our plate for the rest of 2021.
What happens is there's a free app that allows for calorie counting and content, but our paid subscription is an AI service, a smart plan rendered by RIA, and a coach service, which is rendered by nutritionists and trainers. Now, out of the 1,200 nutritionists and trainers we have, around the world, good 70% are women to begin with. So our primary supply side is women, and it's very interesting. These are not women coming from only the absolute metros, etc. But we've got people who live everywhere, and who don't have access to markets, but they're able to find that through Healthify today. Especially, what we see is highly qualified nutritionists graduating from some of the top universities in India end up doing a lot of clinical experience in their 20s, but typically around 30 they would get married and have kids, and then it'd be hard for them to go back to a clinical environment, and many of them would fall off the workforce radar, which they are not today because they have an alternative to work from home with a platform like ours. And our coach services alone, the nutritionist trainer services alone, is generating close to 20 million run rate dollars. So that's at some scale that they're being able to render their services. And why I said it is in substance majority for women is actually also because we find that women's nutrition and consumption patterns are indeed more skewed and off in India than men's are. We see that particularly protein intake amongst women on average is 13% lower than men, and that this gender disparity is particularly more in geographies and cultures where the economic disparity is higher. I don't know. Look, protein is more expensive as a food, and I don't know if there is some internal substitution happening where the male, because of being a fundamental need for being muscular, is consuming more protein in general. But we find that there is more of a nutritional dissymmetry amongst women than men, which then exhibits in higher incidence of lifestyle diseases, obesity, particularly coming in as people shift towards their mid-30s. And so, it's a product that actually works for women as well.
I'll start with you, Liz, with a question. How does CDC approach technology from a gender lens, and what would you consider are successful approaches and tools that have been used?
So we, along with many other development finance institutions, decided to think about what are the criteria that really would exemplify gender lens investing, and devised what we call a 2X challenge and 2X criteria, which go across entrepreneurship, leadership, workforce, and kind of goods and services. And our commitment was to mobilize capital to investments that meaningfully support women in emerging markets. And the original target was $3 billion. And that was surpassed within the timescale that we had envisaged. So it was really very successful in trying to get people to think about intentional gender lens investing. And I think, to be honest, just even having the conversation and having the conversation internally, what does it mean? What do you mean by gender lens investing? What are the kind of criteria that make it successful has been a huge part of the success. But we've got a lot of collateral and materials, toolkits, guides to sectors that are all available for anybody who's particularly interested. And I think the other thing I'd say on kind of tools that are available is that at early stage, we understand that venture capital, the kind of early stage businesses don't always have a massive infrastructure. So we've also support our own investees and others with guides to just, how you can take the early steps. So
I'll now move to you, Archana. BMGF Strategic Investment Fund conducted a gender survey recently across your portfolio in India. Can you tell us a little bit about the top findings and the ways in which you are influencing companies to progress here? And how do you address any possible concerns or biases that may come up?
Thanks, Vidya. We did a kind of baseline survey across our portfolio back in 2019. Our portfolio includes not just companies, but also some funds and kind of their respective companies. A quick background to this is that, by nature of the foundation's program focus in healthcare or agriculture, financial services, so much of what we do is already focused on women. But we took a step back and realized that when we actually make investments in companies, we're not intentionally applying a gender lens to those investments. And so we really wanted to get better at doing that. The baseline survey kind of just indicated across our portfolio that the results were kind of middling. Roughly 50% of our portfolio actively thinks about this and has been kind of implementing measures intentionally. Roughly the other 50% evidence that women comprise less than 50% of their workforce, and in other cases, women comprise less than 20% of the CXO suite, senior management, and board. And so we as investors want to intentionally move the needle on this. In addition, the two qualitative comments that we heard very strongly from our portfolio were, one, investors don't ask the question on gender metrics beyond diligence to evaluate an investment. They never ask it when they've actually made the investment. And secondly, companies want to do better on this. They want to start or improve what they already have established, but they don't exactly always know how to do that. So hearing this feedback, something we've been doing as the Gates Foundation since then are essentially three things. One, in any new investment, and once we invest, when we manage our portfolio, we bring gender metrics to our investment committee. And so looking at the representation of women in a company's customer base or agent network or senior management and board, we kind of report that to our investment committee and have a tough conversation around where those metrics need to improve. And we monitor that on a quarterly basis. The second thing is a step to improve board diversity. We're now mandating that in any of our new investments, we do require a minimum of one woman on the board, and we actively work with companies to help in that recruitment process and identify kind of really qualified technical talent that companies can bring onto their board. The third thing is kind of similar to what Liz touched upon, which is helping companies with guidance materials and best practices on how to realistically implement this, especially if you're an early stage or growth stage company, not with all resources at your disposal. And so we worked closely with Stanford University's gender tech team to actually compile all of the amazing available public literature out there, but in one place for CEOs and investors and portfolio companies to actually look at, and that's up on our SIF website. If you look at sif.gatesfoundation.org, we have a section on promoting gender equity, and we've just put these materials out there as public good information materials for pretty much anyone to refer and use. So that's kind of our first step. Looking at gender diversity with the broader view of addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion more broadly in the long term.
So, a question to both of you, Tushar and Dheeraj, is, in your view, is the Indian technology startup ecosystem doing justice to women as distinct customer segment, target segment? Are products and services really reaching everyone equitably, or is that a massive unutilized opportunity left on the table to get readily available technology to work for gender? Dheeraj, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, no, I think clearly, I think we are just at the start of massive revolution, um, and clearly, I think all the way from education, which we have seen how things have happened in the COVID, but all the way to products and solutions, and especially on the product side. I mean, one of the example, I mean, I have, because I was a co-founder of a company called PSafe, which is in the women hygiene space, and women hygiene and special menstrual hygiene has been a massive agenda at the government level as well, and just the pure awareness of that across smaller cities and towns. But what PSafe actually did is brought the whole idea of menstrual hygiene, toilet hygiene, and try to bring it to the mainstream. And where we are surprised that acceptance of some of these products have actually crossed some of the Western countries. I mean, there's a lot of opportunity for new products and new services, and companies who go slightly deeper into their segment and try to sort of build up a little bit of brand equity, obviously, and great products, are clearly very, very good example.
So listen, our customer segment, right, are actually payments are 60-40, 60% women and 40% men. But to be honest, I think we've never really, I genuinely believe that most of household expenditure, at least in India, if not worldwide to a large extent, today is very significantly either driven or influenced heavily by women. Particularly in healthcare expenditure, education expenditure, and as well as consumer goods purchases, household purchases, etc. Either it's a direct purchase or an indirect purchase. So whenever even when we started our journey, while we did not deliberately focus towards any specific gender, we tried to stay gender neutral. We knew that there is a tilt or a shift or a focus. Particularly health is today preventive health or wellness is very specifically driven as an agenda item. By women is what we see. I think that's what brands are latching onto as well and have been continuously spending. So I don't think there is my view specifically is that it's not like a immediate wave that is starting up. I think there has been increasing focus, and for the right reasons, on women as the primary consumers or primary decision makers in various expenditures, particularly linked to health education.
HealthifyMe has demonstrated some of the best gender metrics across the Chiratae portfolio that we measured. 64% female employee ratio, that's tremendous, and a 60% plus female customer ratio. So we're really eager to learn the story behind these metrics, and was it a conscious strategy or just something that was built out given the nature of your space?
Well, I think the customer piece is definitely something that built out more naturally. As I mentioned, right, like the shift is there, but it's not that it's not a 90-10 or an 80-20 shift. There is a 60-40 shift. And I think that is representative to the slight bias that is there when it comes to taking care of yourself. I think women are better. And service side, again, supply side, we found that was the huge gap that we were saying. We had unbelievable, highly qualified resources sitting around at homes in the country, but didn't have access to markets. And, a digital remote way easily opened that up and allowed for better access to markets, and therefore created an entire business model itself. So it's not like we actively sought out that business model, but rather that it was because of the availability of highly qualified women supply side that our business model could be created so efficiently. So we are almost thankful that such a thing was available and that we did our bit. We didn't do it consciously, to be honest, like I said. So I think it's the market forces that in our business model detected it. What we do consciously, however, one specific area which is of deep passion and interest for me and the HR team is for the core team, for our engineering, for our top leadership, etc., to try and include more women in as perspective. I've always found that, and I have a slight gender bias here, but I do sincerely believe that women make better intuitive decisions, even professionally. When it comes to product and marketing and design and user experience, especially in the tech world, even data sciences creation, it's just, by now, it's almost empirically proven that, smarter, more intuitive decisions have been done. In fact, I feel like we are not having enough representation, even at this metrics, it's too low We'd like to see women more in the engineering field, in the top leadership piece. My board is still all men, something I'm trying to change. That's not okay. And whenever we've had women's perspective, especially for a company that majority is women and customers and supply side, we should be reflecting that same thing in our core leadership and our core board member as well. We only have, in our core leadership, it's only 25% women, which is definitely not okay. But the one area of focus that I think we as a tech startup system could do a lot better at is and whenever we've done that successfully, it's meant disproportionate returns for the firm, is better rehabilitation of women post-pregnancy into work environment. That's an area, an agenda of deep excitement, passion for us and our HR team. Like we've had cases where post their 6 months maternity, we've had created flexible 6 months or 1 year long ramp up processes where people could work from home and balance time schedules, etc., particularly in tech and product, because that's a very critical area, critical time, in a women's career. And many people drop off the force or, remain at sort of substandard optimal outcomes only because they don't get the requisite balance and support from companies, especially in independent families without parental support, etc. So more needs to be talked about it, Vidya, and I think more effort needs to be created. Friendlier policies companies should create. Those women who we've managed to successfully keep and retain post their childbirth have gone on to create some legendary stuff, including like the founder of RIA, our AI coach. The lady who handles our entire Coach Connect platform. Our corporate head. All these are examples of people who've come back from literally creating a life and then doing outstanding innovation work in tech in our company.
And question to you, Liz, which is that change begins at the top of the value chain. Are you seeing enough women representation as asset owners in technology investing?
I think the short answer to that has to be no. We would like to see more. I think, but the short answer is, yeah, we aren't seeing it come through yet, despite everything we know about the success of gender diverse businesses. We've heard some great examples today of exactly how these things can come to pass. But no, and if you do, keep passing them our way. We're very keen to meet more exciting entrepreneurs and founders.
Okay. With that, I will close the session. Thank you, Archana, Dheeraj, Liz, and Tushar. Some fantastic examples, and great to hear, everybody very positive about gender outcomes, and glad to have you, Tushar and Dheeraj, on our portfolio.